have a look at where we stand in terms of, in regards to the digital transformation and also the establishment and adoption of social collaboration within the enterprise. And therefore, I'm very delighted to have again, as nearly as every year, Jane McConnell here on stage presenting her well, formerly known as Digital Trends Research, now known as the Digital Transformation in the Organization Research.
Almost.
Almost. Okay, come on stage. Give her a warm welcome, Jane McConnell.
Thank you, Bjorn.
So, Jane, you're doing this research already since, I think, 8 years.
10. 2006 I started.
Second mistake.
That's okay.
So, and certainly, you started in the area. So, what is the adoption of intranets and internet strategic employer portals and so on, and then moved towards the digital transformation, and now the digital enterprise or the digital.
Actually, what I call it is the organization in the digital age.
Okay.
And I think it's quite different from, I have talked about intranets and then digital workplace. And now, last year, my report it's the 2014 data published in 2015, I changed the name to the organization in the digital age. For me, it's a fundamental change. Yeah.
What I wanted to say with it, that you move from the technology focus to a more organizational focus throughout the years. Contrary to what I was talking this morning, that we have to go again a step back. What do you think about that?
A step back, you mean to technology?
More also to reflect again about the new changes of technology, because they are again a new disruption stage.
I think the new disruption, I recognize how technology is disrupting things. I think the real disruptions are happening in the whole concept, like Hayden was talking about this morning, what an organization is and how people interact and how the changes that are happening on the human level, none of which could happen without the technology. Technology might be driving the changes, but I think the real fundamental changes have to happen in the head.
Great. We are happy to have you with us, and we're eager to hear about the research.
So maybe you have a little feeling for what I might talk about when you see a photograph of dinosaurs up there. The dinosaur age, of which I think many of you are from dinosaur companies. Things are evolving. I wouldn't use the word revolution. There's definitely an evolution in what's happening. And that's part of what I'm going to talk about. This is a photo I used in a recent article I wrote called Going Rogue. And one thing I've noticed personally, and I've seen in my data, is that people are going ahead in organizations, even if the organization is not evolving fast enough. And those people are primarily on the edges of the organization. I'm going to show you some data about that. And then the road photograph is the part of the presentation where I want to talk to you about how it's definitely a long journey, and in some ways we are really just at the beginning of it. In spite of a lot of what we read in the media about technology, about case studies that are held up as examples, they exist. They are great examples. Some companies and organizations are doing fantastic things, but I want to bring a reality check to the whole situation and look at where things are at today. The data here that you'll be seeing this morning is in part from the previous study with provisional figures for the current study, which is ongoing right now. It closes June 15th. I'm going to make a copy of these slides available on a downloading platform. If you do want a copy of them, send me an email and I'll send you a link you can download. The reason I want to trace who gets a copy of this presentation, and you're all welcome to have it, is that I want to make sure that you replace it afterwards when I provide the final version with the final data in it. And so that's why I'm not going to make the presentation available for anyone to download until the data is finalized, but I'm happy to share it with you individually. Just a little bit of my background, if you don't know me, I am focusing more and more on research activities, analyzing the data that I get, writing articles about it. The research, as I said to Bjorn, has gone on for 10 years now, every year. I do a survey online. Many of you have participated in it. And those of you who haven't still can, because as I said, the survey hasn't closed yet. I run a Paris-based work group of practitioners. We had a meeting yesterday. And it's interesting how many things came up in the meeting yesterday that have come up already in the 3 presentations we've seen this morning. And I have worked as a strategy advisor for a lot of global companies for 17 years. I just want to give you a quick, you don't need to look at this in detail, but the point of showing you these charts is that the study results that I'm going to be sharing with you, it's not a European study, it's a global study. Well, it's global in the sense that it's Europe, it's North America, and it's Asia Pacific. I have not yet been able to trigger sufficient interest in Japan and China. I had one year, about 5 years ago, I had 5 or 6 Japanese companies who came on and did the survey. I sent them back the results like I do for everyone, and I never heard back from them again. I don't know what happened. I don't have a link there. So if any of you can help me bring in more organizations from that part of the world, that would be very helpful to the research. So my message is that it's happening, change is happening, but the dinosaurs are not going to blow up immediately with a meteorite, although based on what Hayden said this morning, it might be faster than you think, that some of them will disappear. But in general, I think things are happening in a progressive way. This is a chart I did last year that I found really interesting. For the first time, one of my questions was, how old is your organization? And my survey doesn't appeal to young startup companies. They're not going to be doing the survey. So I already have a particular group of organizations. Here we have a timeline of age, 50 years old, 100 years old, 160 years old. This is a line for 200 years old. Now here I have not put labels. There's a dot for every company that participated in the survey last year. I labeled some of the industries because it's possible to do it here. There's more space on the slide. Here I have the 3 levels of maturity that I have defined using my foundational scorecard that many of you may be familiar with. It's not in this presentation because I don't have time to talk about it this morning, but I can share it with you. And what's really interesting for me is here we have the highest level, not many organizations. Look, we have companies in banking, engineering, and these companies are over 100 years old, and yet they've achieved, based on my analysis, a high degree of digital maturity today. So it's not a question of age, it's more of a question of mindset. I want to take you through some figures from past data and show you where I think it's going today. The first really interesting thing is this number here, 80%. It looks like, with the provisional results I have now, it looks like 80% of the organizations in my survey, I'm not saying it's statistically representative of the world, but 80% of them have deployed capabilities for individuals and across the organization to communicate, to collaborate, and so on. And that's up from the numbers are down here in 2008, up here in 2014, and it looks like it's going to hit 80%. That's a big change in what organizations have. Now, Hayden talked about learning this morning, learning organizations. Last year, and again this year, I test my deployment figures with the results on 3 what I call business scenarios. The first one is this one. Can people learn and develop their skills and knowledge in the natural flow of work? Hayden was talking about we need to find a new model for learning. I haven't gone into new models, but I'm asking, is the work environment such that people can learn as they work? And interestingly, only 40% of the organizations said it's very easy or it's relatively easy. So if you look here from gray down, it's more or less difficult for people to learn on the job. So if we go back here and place that figure on the impact side of my chart, impact for people, in that the figures here are those who responded very easy or relatively easily. Learning in the flow was at 40%. It sat there the last 2 surveys. It didn't move much. And it looks like maybe something's happening. It appears to have gone up. That'll be confirmed later. Second business scenario has to do with the customer-facing people in the organization. This is a population I find really, really interesting. They're at the edges of the organization. They often work on their own. Many of them spend more time outside their own organization than inside the organization. And you can see the results aren't very high here in terms of It's easy for me to get the information I need, to collaborate with the people I need to collaborate with, to serve my customers. So we place that over here, and here we've got serving the customer from 33% who said it's very easy or relatively easy, apparently has gone up to nearly 40%. Third question, this one I find really interesting, is can your organization retain the knowledge and know-how of experts and specialists when they leave the organization? And basically the answer is no. I mean, we can just say it's no. If you look at the figure that we get there, that was the same figure 2 years in a row. In 2013 data, 2014 data. Would you guess that that's gone up? No, it hasn't gone up. That's what I found really amazing so far. That's basically the same percentage. And I was really interested in Gabriele's laughing. It's not funny, Gabriele. But what's interesting is I read an article, a blog post by Esko Kilpi. A very, very, you know him, Diane, I think. Do you know him? Yeah. It really struck me. He did a thing, and then we talked about it on Twitter, where he said knowledge is in people, but then he said when people leave an organization, knowledge goes. But he said knowledge is in the patterns of interaction. And I really zoomed in my head on that idea of patterns of interaction. And one thing I discovered by going back to my data again was that the organizations, I'm just going to back up one here, the organizations that responded more positively to this question tended to have a lot more communities and social networking inside their organization. Therefore, there were systems set up. It was systemic in the organization to share things, to work in different kinds of communities. So when people left the organization, the community was still there. The habits of exchanging from this community to this community and so on. There was like an infrastructure, a virtual infrastructure of communities in those organizations. And I think that's an idea that needs to be explored more. So you see we have a gap here between what's been deployed and what is able to come out of it, which is not that surprising. When I said I was interested in the customer-facing population, it's because they're at the edges of the organization. The article I wrote is called "Is Going Rogue the New Normal?" I published it on LinkedIn and had it triggered this whole discussion after my article. And people, some of them talking about their own personal experience, and I have to decide if I'm going to go rogue. By going rogue, I had defined it as working in a way that does not follow the guidelines of your organization. You're doing what seems best to you, given the context that you are in terms of tools or patterns or behavior. And I feel like in the way the world is moving these days, we're all getting close to organizations where, to situations where we are more and more disconnected from organizations. Salespeople have incentives based on performance, so they're driven by wanting to make the sale, and they will need to do what they need to do with the tool they need to use in order to do their jobs well. And they live in the outside world. They're exposed to what's going on in other parts, in other organizations. This was the subject of one of my articles in the Harvard Business Review, where my thesis was the organizations where the customer-facing workforce finds it easy to do their jobs are the organizations that have a much higher rate of bring your own device, be it a BYOD, a mobile device, BYOPC, a computer, or using applications that are not corporate applications. And the dark blue is what the organizations that have officially approved, using your own. And the paler blue is the proportion of organizations that have not officially approved it, but it's happening anyway. It's known and it's happening anyway in the organizations. And these figures here are much higher than in the average in the survey population, much higher. When you look at this, you bring in your own application. The top segment in the customer-facing workforce, look at this blue here. It's not authorized, but people are doing it anyway. And here's the data for the full survey. And so those people out there, to me, are examples of what's going to be happening more and more in organizations if organizations are not able to provide what people need. That same group of companies, it's not just that they're using their own devices, they also are collaborating more. And I have a number of data points to show you, but that I could show you, but I've chosen just 4. If you look at collaboration spaces with customers, that top segment has the most. I mean, they're really right up there. They have collaboration spaces online where they collaborate with their customers. You look at the full survey population, that's the gray, much, much lower. And I said, I need to see if this is really, really a trend or not. So I took the top % who said it's very easy to get what we need to do our jobs. Then I took the second one, the pale blue, is the people who said it's relatively easy. And then the gray is the full survey average. And you can see it just goes right down. In terms of the answer to the question, the way we work is collaborative. See how low the figures are here. I mean, even we're talking here 25% there. People, this is self-assessment now. I don't go to these 300 organizations around the world and look at their work environments. They themselves are saying collaboration is not yet embedded in the way we work. So, agreed that it's a journey. It's a common metaphor. It's a long journey, and it's a journey that makes a difference. It's not necessarily the destination. I'd like to share, these are new questions I've asked for the first time this year. That's why I have the qualifier at the bottom, that the data's not absolutely, it's still provisional. The question was, do you have, for digital transformation, do you have a comprehensive, clear strategy that's being implemented? You can say we have 7% said yes. After that, the next level was that we are building. We have a lot of things going on. We're trying to get things aligned. That's the bulk of what's going on right now with organizations. And we talked about that in my work group yesterday. So we had several examples in the work group where basically what people are doing is getting things aligned. There's a lot of energy and initiatives and things happening in different parts of the organization, but they're happening in different directions. Do you have a compelling vision? And I find the figure of 24% encouraging, but with the question, is it communicated clearly throughout the organization? We're down. And what I find interesting here is this is all stuff that is just happening right now. The majority of companies are working on this. Work in progress in all 3 areas. And even this is really work in progress when you think about it. So compelling vision, yes. But we haven't developed that into a comprehensive strategy yet, or we're not communicating about it. So even this is a kind of work in progress. I thought about this slide when you were talking, Hayden, this morning. My question was, what is the primary focus of your digital transformation? And it's very interesting. When you look over here at new business models, that's one of the lowest. So my question was, it listed these items, and it said, what's your primary focus? What is your secondary focus? And the third option was not a focus for us at all right now. And the figures you see here are the ones who clicked on primary focus. So I took the ones for whom it was really important. And what I found interesting is we still have a lot of emphasis on improving and making more efficient over here. That's level 2. What we do now, we're still trying to maintain the way we're working and just do it better, do it faster, be more productive. And when you want to look at doing something fundamentally new, for most of the people, at least the organizations in my survey who responded, this is not one of their primary goals. I also was amused and pleased to see that to improve the customer engagement and experience and the employee engagement and experience are roughly the same. To be honest, I expected it to be more customer-oriented than employee-focused. So we'll see if the final figures confirm that. I found that a positive piece of information. I also found this interesting. I've asked this question a couple times now. At what level is what is the highest level in your organization of the person who has responsibility for your digital strategy? And so over here we have in 2014, 5% at the CEO level, call it 40% at the C level. In other words, people who report directly to the CEO. And both of those figures have increased this year. So it seems to me that the C-suite is getting more involved in digital strategy. However, as the French say, there's a bémol that I have to mention instead of a B flat in English. Senior management is still lagging far behind. For example, in my question, do senior managers provide vocal support to what you're doing? The number is higher than that. Then I say vocal support and resources for your different digital initiatives. 35% said yes. That's not so high. Then I pushed it a little bit more and I said vocal support, resources, and participation. Are they involved? Can they be seen in the different initiatives that are taking place? Down again. And do you feel like they have sustained commitment to these digital initiatives? And they were down at 10%. So that's, on one hand, more and more are getting involved, but on the other hand, there still is a need to get them more involved, to bring awareness to them. We talked about that in my group yesterday. And I feel like we as a group of, I don't know what you want to call us, digital change people, organizational change people, whoever we are, we have things that we need to do in our own organizations, and that's why I asked the question to Hayden this morning, what can we be doing to bring change ourselves? I think it's an easy out to keep saying senior management doesn't understand. Senior management doesn't want to get involved. We have to find ways that we can tackle that problem ourselves. So the things I would like you to think about before I close my presentation is the different angles that you have to take into account for your digital initiatives and your change initiatives. I'm saying digital because it's an easier way to talk, but in fact I mean your change initiatives in your organization. And the scale that we have here is, for example, there's a question where the person says, for example, strong involvement from senior leaders. They can say yes, and it's highly effective. Or yes, but there's low impact. Or yes, but work in progress. Planned, but not started. Not planned, don't know. So you can see this is okay. The next question is, do you have active involvement from all or most business units? And I think this is a critical thing. We still have too many silos where business units are doing their own thing. And if they're doing their own thing, it might be really great, but you've got to get that cross-organizational involvement, and that figure drops. Third one, and this is even more important in my opinion, and the figures are even lower. Do you have ownership? In other words, really active involvement from frontline people, operational people. And it's not happening. These things tend to still be driven by people in the center of the organization and not my beloved customer-facing people on the edges of the organization. They're not just customer-facing, but all the people who are out in the field, working in countries and so on. They're not being involved enough yet in how the organization is bringing about change. And the final point is there a cross-organizational decision-making process? Are you working on this and talking about this across the organization? Or is it still something that's top-down and still something that's being done by silos, in silos? So those are some things I wanted to share with you today. Back to the idea that change is happening slowly, that people on the edges are the ones. I think, Bjorn, when you said this morning in your very introduction, I made a little note here. You said something about can the people keep up with what's happening? And I made a note because I wanted to mention that. I don't think that's the right question. I think the right question is, can the organization keep up with what a lot of the people are doing in the organization? I think it's the organization that's dragging and the people that are leading in many cases. I think that's it then. I'd like to explain, if you want a copy of these slides, I'll be happy to share them. And then I'll send you an update when the survey closes. If you'd like to participate in the survey, just drop me an email and I'll explain to you how you can do it. You'd be very welcome to do that. So, I'm okay, I'm in within my time. Yeah. Just. When you walk up to the front, I know it's almost finished.
It's fine. No, so okay. This way we have time for discussion.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you, Jane, first of all. Any questions already? So then I will start. Well, you worked out some, or elaborated now some new trends and so on. Also, this people are going rogue at this point. But in a long time perspective, over all those past years you're doing this research, have we substantial do you see substantial advancements within the companies? Or is this
I see very slow advancement in terms of understanding and involvement by people at the top of organizations. I looked at data I had from the year 2006 when it was focused on intranets, and I had a question, does your management consider the intranet to be business critical? And it was like 10% said yes. My second question was, what would happen in your organization if the intranet went down? How soon would people notice it? 40% said in 1 hour. People use it daily. And there was already the beginning of a gap between perception and the reality. I think that still exists. I think that there is clearly movement towards collaboration in the sense, collaboration is a very, very vague word. It has so many different meanings. But there's definitely a shift towards people working more in teams, people being able to self-direct their work to a greater extent than they could in the past. So there's been a mindset change. I just think it's very slow. And all industries are not the same either. It's interesting to do an industry by industry analysis. It can be quite different, which we don't have time to do, of course.
But if we compare this with those intranets and also with today's, whether they are working differently, better, improved, and so on. And on the other hand, you're also saying that the organizations that are most advanced, that are those organizations who address issues from customer-facing processes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. My question is, are we posing the right questions if we just looking at the internal collaboration improvement? Is this the question to be asked? Isn't the question to be asked, are we improving the external approaches? And
absolutely, absolutely, because if you stop and think about it very brutally, why does an organization exist? It exists to provide a service or product to someone or to a population. So how well is that happening? And what interaction is there? And something I noticed in a report I have not published yet, I did a quick survey oriented around HR a couple months ago, and I asked the HR people what they felt the objectives, primary objectives were of the digital initiatives, and for the first time ever, I saw they were oriented towards business performance from HR people. I haven't published this yet, but it was very, very striking. That's a big change. The HR involvement is becoming greater, and I think the intentions of the organization are becoming more oriented towards what I would call business. That's been a clear revolution in the past 10 years. There's no doubt about that.
And then, if we think about your meme of people are getting, or what are you saying? People are getting rogue? No.
Going rogue?
Going rogue.
Yes.
It's actually behind this is people wants to get things done.
Absolutely, they want to do their jobs.
They want to do their jobs. Yeah. They want to close the open task within the process.
I wouldn't phrase it that way. I think that's a very process way of saying it.
Just leave out the process thinking behind the
they
wording.
They want to get done what they have to get done, and the more they are exposed to the ways other people work in the outside world, the more they see that there are different ways of working. Also, that's another good trend.
But that, on the other hand, for me, implicates that that all the solutions that have been provided yet from the intranet towards the social collaboration thing, they are not really supporting getting things done.
Not yet, no. No. Processes are too complex. That's another thing I dig into this year. It's too hard to do things. People, to get something done quickly, they have to go around the corporate process. And I think that doesn't make people feel good when they're doing their jobs. They have to figure out a way to get something done, knowing that they're doing it in a way or using a tool that's not approved by the organization. And so those people are beginning to say, I don't give a, I've got to get this done. People have so much time pressure today. There's so much information that they need to absorb. Really, it's changed a lot in the last few years. And so people they're compelled to do what they have to do.
Then as a last question in this row, for me, this also implies a little bit that maybe the company doesn't really need a holistic social collaboration platform internally. because there are different personal issues, requirements to get things done, and people will choose their tools that they want to use at the end.
I think an organization needs a way that people can communicate and collaborate that stays inside the organization for certain subjects. And something I looked at last year and again this year is, what kind of communities do you have? Are they internal members only, or to what extent do they include external people? And the organizations that have the greater level of digital maturity include a small proportion, but external people in their communities, including innovation, solving problems, and so on. So there's an opening up, but an organization, you can't open everything up. You still need a space where you can be entre vous, as you would say in French, and you can work towards whatever it is that you're working towards. That's it. We need different layers. That's different dimensions, if you want to call it that.
So the future vision of the digital workplace that this situation would be best for is certainly there's a kernel, a core system where some interactions are taking place, but then still at the external layer there are different solutions.
Yes, I think that there'll never be one solution. I mean, the whole digital work environment will be a mosaic of different things that people need to learn how to use as appropriate as they want to use. I think there's going to be a lot of individual freedom in that. Again, with Elena from Amadeus who's going to talk tomorrow in a great case she's going to give us. She was at my group yesterday. We talked about that a lot. How do you get all these different pieces to fit together? And I think it's a major challenge, and I think probably you never will get all the pieces to fit together perfectly. I see Chi Chin wants to.
Oh, yes. Just a second.
I'm also interested in your basically, I'm also interested in how you break down these digital strategies questions. Did you actually also try to see who is leading it? Is that only from IT, or is that also from other businesses? Things like this?
Yes.
And also, the understanding of the digital strategy, is that purely technology, or is that organizational, or is that something else? Do they... I think people would be interested in digital strategy, but when you talk about digital strategy, it's a bombastic word.
Yes, yes, it
so
is.
We need to break this down.
Yes.
Is there any part?
I have data on that,
okay.
because when I ask about the people involved in or with responsibility for digital strategy, I ask what function are they in? And so, for example, because of a presentation I'm giving tomorrow to people in the financial industry, I've actually looked at that in detail in the financial industry, where you have a very high amount of initiatives being driven by IT people, with a fair amount, they have a proportion of operational people that's not high, but it's higher than other sectors. So you can see for the banking industry, they're down at the real business needs. And I can do that for other industries also. I don't have the data here. And I agree with you that one reason I changed the name of my work, and I changed the URL of my website. It used to be digitalworkplacetrends.com, and now it's organizationdigitalage.com, because I really want to emphasize the fact that it is not a question of technology, it is the organization. And how that organization was designed and how it's changing.
Okay, as a final question, what would be from all these insights you're gaining, okay, this is out, from all these insights you're gaining from your research, what would be your core recommendation where people should improve their projects?
That's a good question. I think that organizations should stop talking about projects and stop funding these things as finite things and think more about processes, how they improve processes, that there are different steps along the way. And I've talked about this recently with a client I have. We talked about it in the group yesterday, but the idea of when you have a budget of so much money for a project to take place this year from this date to this date with a beginning and an end, that's not the way you can really bring about transformation. So I think the whole project concept itself, and I'm not an expert on project management, I can just see people getting trapped and companies getting trapped in the idea of running this as a project. So I would recommend looking at it from a different viewpoint.
What would be a program, an initiative?
I like the word initiatives. I use that word a lot when I talk. A program, again, with a lot of the companies I know, it becomes a whole big thing with a slogan, and you have phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3. I like the concept of digital initiatives. I think they should be able to come from anywhere in the organization, but there has to be a fundamental, I would say, strategic principles or guidelines where people are aligned. They have a shared purpose. And as long as it falls within that shared purpose and it's not detrimental to that, and they can get funding within, say, a Kickstarter environment in the organization, people should be free to experiment with what they want to do.
Great. Thank you, Jane McConnell.
Thank you.